Welcome to Perfect-ish, where it's not about having perfect time management, but about perfecting your relationship with time. I'm your host, Callie Brigham, and every week we'll talk all things time and how to maximize it without burnout or guilt. Whether we're chatting with an expert or I'm sharing my 20 years of time management experience, you'll learn simple strategies to make every moment count. Here, it's all about getting close to perfect-ish. So let's synchronize our watches and dive in. Hi, friend. Today, we're going to make time for redefining success and taking back control of how we spend our time. Of course, the perfect-ish way. So let me ask you, have you found yourself checking boxes, maybe even hitting your goals and staying crazy busy, but still feeling like maybe something's missing? Well, you're not alone. And I cannot wait for you to meet my new friend and our guest today, Rachel Closson. She is a master high performance coach. We get her all to ourselves, and she's going to help us, ambitious women, reclaim what success has maybe loudly or quietly stolen: our time, our relationships, our peace. So, a little bit about her. Rachel has spent years chasing achievement. This is in her words. But somewhere along the way, she realized that maybe more wasn't always better. And if we're real, how many of us have fallen into that trap and continue to? So, in our conversation today, what I want to do is dive into what happens when success and fulfillment maybe aren't aligned. Maybe saying no is something that we need to add to our vocabulary, maybe creating a life that actually feels good without burning out. So raise your hand if you're like, you are speaking to me, because I'm speaking to myself. And so, yeah, we're Rachel and I are both raising our hands, which is why she's here. I think this is going to hit home, Rachel, in a lot of ways. So if everybody you want to grab your coffee or LaCroix, we're going to take a deep breath. We're going to get into it. So let's get into it, Rachel. How about that for setting the stage for what we're going to talk about? Does that resonate with you?
Gosh, yes.
Okay, good.
I am so glad I am not at that point anymore.
So it's possible.
Yes, it is absolutely possible. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm
So
living proof of that.
Well, that's why you're here. That's why you are our expert today. And so if it is possible, that probably means there was an awareness at some point that things were not running as they should be, right? Maybe they are running on full cylinders, but something's missing. There's an imbalance. There's warning signs. And I think let's just jump right into that, because this is a really critical topic, probably more than we even realize. So tell us what happens to have us have that awareness that we're off. And then get us
Absolutely.
back on. And then
Yes.
if we're on, then get us back on.
Yes, bring you back. So
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that you said is the awareness factor and just understanding and knowing I've got a problem and I need to make a change. That's like the first and foremost piece. So anybody that's listening to that and hearing those words, it's just this resonates so much with me and I need to make a shift. And that's where I was. And the biggest thing for me was the thought that success and having a fulfilled, amazing, wonderful life couldn't coexist together. And that was something that I believed like wholeheartedly, that you had to just sacrifice everything in order to get this beautiful business or have this, work of art, but you had to sacrifice your time, your relationships with your family. And that was the lie that I had essentially been telling myself for years and years.
Okay, so tell us what some of those warning signs maybe looked like for you, because we might become so used to this cycle or this wheel or what culture tells us or the busy badge or those things that we have maybe seen and even in mentors that we might miss these signs along the way that are like danger, danger, warning, warning, you're about to burn out, you're about to go off the rails. Like what does that look like if we are going to be aware? What can we start to look for that we can then start to make the shift?
So the first part would be really looking at, and I always tell people, get a piece of pen and paper. Pen and paper is so important when you're actually looking at what's in front of you and you're writing it down. When we just start thinking of these different things in our head, it just kind of jumbles together versus when you have it on paper and you can see what you're doing or not doing, that makes a really big difference. And for me, I was burning the candle at both ends. I really was in a state of chasing achievement. I was just going for that next goal or that next raise or whatever that was at that time. And then when I hit it, I wasn't satisfied. It wasn't enough. It fell short. And I thought to myself, okay, I've reached some serious goals and I've done some really big things, yet I feel still in lack of. And that's when I knew, is this what I'm chasing? Like, when does the chase stop? Like, when does then the fulfillment come in and pair with this satisfaction, if you will? And I never felt that. And what I had to do was I had to say, okay, I reached this and I'm not fulfilled. Why not? And when I took a step back, I realized my balance in my life, my relationships, my health, everything was it was so whacked. It was so bad. And I remember my husband even sitting me down and saying, if this is what success looks like, I really don't want you in this. And that was that wake up moment for me where I was like, something has to change. And I didn't know what I really needed to do in the sense of change other than write down, what do I enjoy doing? Because I love work. I don't have like a lot of hobbies outside of like my family and my chickens. Like, I love work and I love to create. I love to help people, feel better and just kind of step into their own power. Like, that is my passion. But I also had to realize, how can I do this with balance? And so what I did was, back to that pen and paper, I wrote down things that I loved and things that I didn't love. And it kind of looked like what serves me and what doesn't serve me. And what didn't serve me was a really big list. And that list just, included, I didn't want to work every weekend, just work, 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 work. I wanted work to be enjoying, I wanted to enjoy it. I didn't want to feel like I was at the mercy of my work. I wanted to work intentionally, and I wasn't. And I'll talk about a little bit about what that actually looks like. Um, but the one thing that really stood out the most to me was that my schedule and my life for work was at the demands of everybody else. It was not what I had created. It was what everybody else had created for me. And so here I am, I'm all mad, right? I'm just like, everybody's taking my time. Everybody wants a piece of Rachel and, needs this and needs that, because they say your inbox or DMs or whatever, those are the schedule basically and demands of everybody else for you, not for yourself. And when I had that realization and I was so frustrated at everybody else for making me, if you will, making me do these things, it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with me and not honoring myself in those boundaries and creating that space for me. And so what I did was I said, all right, I can't be frustrated at these people because these people will take what I give them. So I said, all right, I'm not doing this anymore. And what does that list look like that I don't want to give anymore? And once I did that and had that awareness and I really got clear about what I wanted my work to look like, what I wanted my relationships, my life, et cetera, that's when I knew how to then start creating that system of intentionality, boundaries, time management, time blocks, whatever that may be. So,
Yeah, I feel like as I'm listening to you, there is a fragile thread or a fragile connection or a fragile bridge between this idea of success and achievement, and then also, on the other hand, contentment and peace, right? And so often, because it is so fragile, I feel like we either ignore it or we don't think that it's possible for those things to be connected. And what I think we're going to do today is strengthen that so that we can have both, that it's not going to be one or the other. I love that too, Rachel, that you started to give us some examples about what because I was going to say, okay, what was on your list? Like, I want to be
right.
nosy. What was that? What was on your list? And as you were talking, I was like, yeah, that's in my, like, I guess I've looked, if I was living another life and I looked into mine as it is right now, would I want it? Like, would I say, yeah, that's the kind of life I want? And if not, we got to start making those lists. I don't necessarily want to work all weekend or at night or virtually or in person or whatever that looks like for each of us. Okay. So you mentioned boundaries, which I think is such an important way to strengthen that thread, right? Between the two. Like let's put some power to that. And really what we're doing is we're not giving people permission to go ahead and be like our scheduler, right? Or to be our boss or to be the one to tell us what to do. But it's easier said than done because these are usually people that we live with or that we love or that we do want to serve. So, yeah. How do we
Well,
kick
and
off some boundary chat?
right. And that is one of those things where I always like to tell people that people can only meet you where they're at. And that is so important to really have a heart of understanding that people a lot of people don't have boundaries. So it's very hard for them to honor them because they don't understand them themselves. And that is not a fault to them. It's just how they've either grown up or, what their patterns are, or their habits, whatever that may be. So we have to look at these boundaries as these are something for ourselves. This isn't necessarily, it is for other people, but we first have to really figure out what does it look like for us first before we put that out there for everybody else. So for an example of setting a boundary for me, like I had mentioned, people taking your time or them messaging you in your inbox and you going to it first thing in the morning. That is something where they're not specifically saying to you, hey, will you like go check your inbox at 7 o'clock in the morning? That's you doing that. So you're not necessarily going to put a boundary on them for that, but you are for yourself. And you're going to say, like, hey, Rachel, you're not going to get up first thing in the morning and check your DMs. Why? Because that is your boundary that you are going to create that space for yourself. They have no idea, right? So it has to start with us before it can really start and kind of bleed out into everybody else. And then once you start, and this is the biggest thing when it comes to boundaries, because there is such thing as a boundary fatigue. And it's just like, I don't know about you, but like with my kids, well, my son is older now. He's going to be 15, but my daughter, she's 6, and she's like, "Do you want to play a game?" And I'm like, "Okay." Girl has got like so many rules. And I'm just like, what was rule number 1? Like,
It's the
you'll
girl thing. My second is a girl. They are the boss of everything. Yes.
yes, and we had like so many rules, and I'm just like, first of all, I'm like so tired by the 10th rule, and I can't even remember what the first rule what was, let alone she could not keep up with making sure that I followed all these rules. So boundary fatigue is very similar to that, where we have to start out very small, because if we do too much at one time, and it's just like, firing off all of these rules, you're going to tucker out, and you're not really going to have strength behind them. And you're not really going to get that sustainability and the longevity in them, because no one can keep up with, like I said, my 6-year old's, 10 rules. So that's very important to make sure you prioritize, hey, this is like what I really need to do. And the biggest thing with like the boundaries is what sets you up for success first thing in the morning. Morning is our best hours. That should really be for us. And so for me, that was not getting in my DMs, not answering emails, not doing any of those things first thing in the morning. That was like my first boundary of me getting my time back for me. And girl, I will tell you, like, once that started, I was like, this is like fire. This is amazing, because I was honoring myself, and I was so thankful and had that sense of gratitude of, thank you, Rachel, for creating this space for me. And I felt so much better when I then answered those messages, because I didn't feel like I was being robbed from something. Um, but the other thing I do want to touch on, with boundaries, especially if you have kids, and structure, and my time and my love for work, I didn't want to I didn't want to show my kids that in order to be successful, that you couldn't have a beautiful life as well. It's success wasn't about running yourself ragged to the point of no return, or being so lost in this space of, I got to find myself again. And I openly share that with my kids. And I tell them, like, it is wonderful to do something that you love, and you can be passionate about it, but you have to create space, intentionality, and balance in that space, because if not, it will you will have like what I experienced, which was like D, all the above: burnout, frustration, um, just a sense of loss.
Gosh, you have had just some little like micro tweaks in my brain that I feel like I'm sure other people have had, because if you're listening to our podcast, chances are you are into personal development. Chances are you have heard about boundaries before. But Rachel, I think just the picture in my mind that a boundary is not, it's not against someone else. Like, it's not to be rude to someone else. It's not to like kick them out of the boundary. They might not even know that there is a boundary for them. So it's really not about them. The boundary is more protection for me. And I think that that is a missing component for most of the structure that people have about boundaries. It's like saying to somebody else, I'm having a boundary against you because, yeah, and they don't even have to know. So I love that. I think that is, I mean, dare I say, like revolutionary thought. So thank you for that gift. In addition to that, I love that as this high performance coach, which I think we tend to think, okay, let's radically change everything and change it now. I got the impression it's better to start small than to start strong, right? So start in one area of your life. Can't think of a better time to start than the morning. to protect that, to guard it. I also love how you talk to yourself too. You're like, Rachel, this is good
Oh,
for you.
yeah.
Rachel, do not get it into your DMs. Glad I'm not the only one.
Yes.
Self-talk. And then lastly, just in this segment, as a mom of a now 16-year-old and 14-year-old, I want to model things for my kids. I want to model generosity. I want to model kindness. I want to model, right? All these things that we want to model. Why on earth wouldn't I want to model what this can look like? This balance, this harmony, this mess up sometimes too, getting back on track. So that modeling part, not perfect, right? We're not perfect on here. That I think is also a huge aha. It's not just about us. There's a ripple effect when we do this.
There is. And like you said with that, the boundaries, not like at people. It's essentially a framework. And this framework, and that's where people have this huge misconception um, of, like you said, boundaries, like being at people, and it's you're telling everybody no, and telling everybody no is not a bad thing, like at all. But boundaries are these frameworks where you decide where you can give more or you need to pull back. That is the core of the boundary. It's not to block you in and, to shield you off from everybody. That's not what that's about. It's about creating this space and the give and take, in that. And even just saying, for me, when I wasn't protecting those boundaries, and I think this resonates with a lot of people, is we want to say yes, we want to help, we want to give of ourselves. I am a natural born giver. I will give, give, give. But what I realized was there's nothing wrong with that. And the part of it where it loses its potency or its generosity, if you will, in the giving is when you're giving too much to every little thing. Because if you're giving yourself a little bit here and a little bit there, no one is getting the full capacity of you and who you are. And that's where I really had to say, saying yes to everybody is actually not really a great thing. They're not getting the best of me. They're getting this short, tightened version of me that is just of whatever I have left. And I thought, that is not even fair to them, let alone myself. And that's where I had to create that structure to say, I can't say yes to everybody, because if I'm saying yes to everybody, then like, where are the no's? Like, where is the balance in that? And so I had to really come into that idea of, what did I really want this to look like? And I thought, I got to say no more often, and not necessarily like at people, but just to myself. No, Rachel, we're not going to create another thing today. No, Rachel, we're going to just focus on what we're doing, and we're just going to stay the course. Uh, those are perfect no's, right?
See, I think that also the permission. Now, I know we were joking about talking to ourselves. If somebody does have a hard time saying no, like to somebody else, like no mom or no, coworker or no whatever. Actually, if we'll say no more to ourselves, right, then we help to understand where our yeses need to be, and it resonates a little bit easier, I think, to just say no, Callie. You know, not today. That's
Not
not what was on
today.
your schedule. Not today. Maybe tomorrow, but not today, Callie.
Right.
And I think too, Rachel, what it helps in my mind is the difference between having a reactive life and a proactive life. And I was talking to one of my clients the other day, working with her, and she kind of had it backwards, like I think you did, and a lot of people do, right? She was doing everybody else's stuff first. So we were flipping the script a little bit. And I said, but what you can do now is same thing with modeling. You can tell the people later on in the afternoon, hey, this morning in my quiet time or while I was working out or while, and guess what you're doing? You're also showing them that maybe you didn't respond to them in the morning, but that's because you were doing these really mission critical things and maybe they can also understand. And now we're making an effective change for somebody else too. So it's like, instead of fighting against it, I'm a big fan of not fighting and flowing with it instead, right?
Yes, I love that. I love that. And you brought up a great point too, is in the pause and waiting. So I like to tell people, and you even mentioned, reactive. So when we are told something or something comes at us, whether it's something from our boss or our kids, spouse, I mean, this can be applicable across the board. I want you to really think about creating a pause. And a pause actually creates control. So, psychologically, when you create this space of a pause and people will go, okay, pause. Like how long is a pause? Well, I hate to say this, but until it's uncomfortable. A lot of people just, will just answer right away, or give their reaction because that's just how we are, in human nature. But if we could really take a step back, that's the control. Like that is where we really step into our power, is when we take that step back and we think about what was said, we digest it, we pause in that moment, and then we then say what we need to say. And it may not necessarily be a no. I was sharing this with a client the other day, and she was like, well, how do I just tell somebody no? I go, well, why do you just have to tell somebody no? I was like, if someone asks something of you, why can't you pause and say, you know what? Um, can I get back to you on this tomorrow? That buys you time, and it also lets you sit with how you feel about it. And so many people, I mean, I do this with my kids. So, I mean, this isn't like, I'm over here and I've got this like perfected. No, not by any means. This is like an ongoing process. But instead of being so quick to say something or so quick to just fire off, I'll actually wait a minute and I'll pause. And then I'll be like, let me get back to you on that. Can you give me 15 minutes? Especially like with my kids, because normally I'm just like, now, now it's not happening. No, you're not doing that. No, you can't have more game time. Where I'm like, okay, maybe they will actually feel like I listened and I actually took what they said to heart, and I'm going to give it time to get back to, and even the day later with getting back, like my client getting back to that person, it still may be a no, but it gives you that time to process and go, yeah, I just don't want to do that. It just doesn't feel good. And I think a lot of us, we do stuff, and that's why we also get frustrated with other people, is because we're in this state of, we just do it even though we don't want to do it. And that's on us. That's not on them. And that allows us that pause, that control, that sitting with ourselves and that awkwardness. Because a lot of people, it is awkward to sit with ourselves. But if we actually sit with ourselves and the more often we do it, we go, yeah, it doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do this. And then when you say no, you're like, well, gosh, like that felt really good. I could do that again. I wasn't mean. I wasn't nasty. I wasn't vindictive. I wasn't any of these things. I just kind of held my stance. I honored myself and I just said, I can't. And it was as simple as that. And we have to remember, it is not our responsibility for how the other person receives it, especially when we are sitting in a state of, um, trueness to ourself, meaning i'm not I'm not like a jerk. I'm not vindictive, I'm not rude, I'm not trying to purposefully hurt people. So if by me telling somebody no, if they take it as me being a jerk, that's on them. My delivery was pure and clean. That's all I am responsible for. And I think that's really important where we have to remember our responsibility lies within us and not based off the other person and how they just are going to take it.
I think too, they're hopefully, again, if they are a somewhat healthy human on the other end of the conversation, that taking that pause really is honoring to them too. There is a respect there of not a flippancy, but let me really consider this. And hopefully that means that your response to them feels respectful because you have
Yes.
taken the time instead of either just charging his head and saying no, and maybe it doesn't come across the right way, or saying yes and then really maybe not being full in, which could feel disrespectful later. So it is the most respectful thing you can do for yourself and do for other people. Rachel, I heard someone who would write all the things that they said no to. They actually would write it down in a separate calendar. And when that day and time came up, they would look at it and like just do a little happy dance that they didn't have to go do that. Right?
Yes.
Like, I
Yes.
don't have to go to the PTA meeting tonight. Like it was
Ye
their way of like celebrating. I don't have to do it. It's the I didn't have to do list. I thought that was so
yes.
smart because what a sense of relief that you took that pause and now it doesn't matter. Maybe you're watching a movie with your husband or you're just, hanging out with your kids or you're just reading a book. Like it didn't have to mean that you were being necessarily productive during that time. Maybe you just needed a break. And so I thought that was such a good idea. So clever.
That is amazing. No, that's so, so good. And that really makes me want to just share this last little piece, which is everything that we do, and I've really leaned into this over the past year and then really heavily the past like 6 months, is living intentionally. Now, I want to say this because intentionality, whatever your word may be, and we're still into the beginning of the new year and people picking their words and all that. And so, if you picked a word, I would encourage you to think about it in this example, if you will, because my word was intention or intentionality. And I thought to myself, what does that really mean? Because a lot of the time we just throw out words. I want to be more bold. I want to be more authentic. I want to be, for me, intentional. And it was like, well, what does that really mean? Like, let's get to the meat of intentionality. And one of the things was I couldn't look at, just like you couldn't look at bold or authentic as a broad overview. You would really have to look at it in these capsules, if you will, or these sections of our life. How do I want to live intentionally with my kids and in them individually, my husband individually, my parents individually, my work, whatever, coworkers, friends, like everything, my health individually. I wanted to look at everything and say, how am I going to step into intentionality with, say, my husband? And again, going like kind of how we did with boundaries, where you can't make massive moves or you're not going to, it's not sustainable. You're just going to get tuckered out and you're going to be like, this is like way too much to keep up with. But what I did was I looked at it in segments of quarters. So I looked at our year in quarters. So obviously 4 quarters. So us being in the first quarter, and this was the other thing with it. It wasn't how was my husband going to be more intentional with me. It was how was I going to be more intentional with my husband. I was the one that was going to be responsible for this word and this piece that I created. And what I did was I said, okay, what is my goal this first quarter, January, February, March? And it was, I really wanted to lean into weekly date nights. and devotional time, 2 nights a week. And at the 3-month mark, somewhere in this 3 months, I would love to, go on a long weekend getaway, where my folks can stay with my kids. That's intention. That is saying, I want to create this space for just him and I. And this is how I'm going to do this to show up. Not what can he do for me, but what can I do to help grow and nurture this? And I did the same thing for my kids. I did the same thing for my business. And I will tell you, especially with my business, just because so many people have their own businesses or they're doing their own thing. The reason why we work ourselves into the ground is because we generally aren't working. You know how they say, like, work smarter, not harder? It's really about intentionality and what we're really trying to get to or what our goal is. And it's not about biting off more than we can chew. It's really creating these small actionable steps every single day. But it's going back to being bold or being authentic. Like, what are you doing every single day that's making you more bold? And how are you going to check in with yourself every single day to say, did I live in boldness? Did I live in, authenticity or whatever? Was I intentional with my time? And so much of the time we clog our schedules with stuff that is not priority, that is not, like for me, was not intentional. And I go, why is this even on here? Just like, the person writing no down, like, oh, praise the Lord, I don't have to do this today, because it really boils down to when you know your priorities and you are working on them every single day, you will feel so much more fulfilled in what you're doing and the time that you're putting with your husband. So if I am in a project with work and I'm heavily into it and because I'm not saying don't work on stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm saying spend that time that needs to be spent and know what you need to do. Be smart about it. Don't be distracted by it. Give yourself the allotted time. But because you're doing that and you have also looked at all these other areas, like I've planned this time with my husband, I planned this time with my kids, your life doesn't feel unbalanced. So then when you have those successes in your business and you have those achievements, you go, this feels so good because I worked hard for this, but all these other things were right there clicking along and they didn't skip a beat. And that is really where we have to get into this space of being mindful, not just long term, but how can I step up and step in to this every single day with what I'm wanting and what I'm wanting to also become. So maybe that's boundaries. I want boundaries this year. What do your boundaries look like every single day? What little wins are you going to celebrate? Because I'm going to tell you, after the first month of January, and I've planned everything like with my husband and my kids and my work, my kids got sick for a week. And I was like, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed that my work is not getting done because I already know what needed to be done and what has already been done. And there was this sense of satisfaction and also presence where I could be present with my kids and nurture and be what I needed to be at that time instead of wishing or hoping I needed to do all of this work. So it's definitely, if you can embrace it and step into that and say, gosh, I just need change. I need this shift. I got to create this just like mapping of my life. I'm telling you, you will be like a new person because I am. It's just game changer.
You're the proof, but you had to go through it. You had to go
Yes.
through the mess, and you had to go through the hard, and you had to go through the yuck and the all that to get here. I mean, isn't that what life is about, right? Like we're not wasting it. We're not wasting the pain and the struggle because here you are today giving us such light. Rachel, you, whether it was intentional or not, you literally brought us full circle. I've never thought, and I have taught word of the year for I think 10 years now. So you're singing my song, but I never thought to use my word as like the filter in all the areas and then in my schedule. And when I say full circle, because I take notes, I was looking back at the very beginning when you urged us to take a pen and pencil or paper and pencil or paper and pen and write down the things that you love and what you don't love, guess what we get to use as our filter for it? Our word, right? And so that should make the list really stinking easy. Like, if it's not intentional in this area, it goes on the I don't love it list, right? Or it goes on the
Yes.
love list or whatever. So I feel like you kind of brought everything back to what the first step is in our awareness. Well, first, the awareness is okay, I am not crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. This is a natural thing for an ambitious woman to have to go through. Now I'm going to make my list. I'm going to set some boundaries. I'm going to model this. I'm going to pause. I'm going to not take responsibility for somebody else. And I'm going to live out my word in what I do and still have progress, but have peace too. I mean, it kind of sums it up, right? You're
Yes.
brilliant. And I just summed up all your brilliance.
Well, and I think the thing is a lot of people, they pick a word, and then the reason why they don't stick to it is because there's really no, and this is like a little coin thing that I have on my planner, is there is no method to the madness. And it's like, you have to have this method. You have to know, how do I want to be bold? How do I want to show up? How do I want to do this? How do I want to do that? If you don't know, my friend, you're not going to live it out. You're setting yourself up, like, don't even pick a word. Like, just don't bother. Because really, if you're going to set out to pick something, or I would just ask you, like, this is such a great um tool to just gauge with, is what do I want my marriage or my relationship to look like in these next 3 months? Is that more communication? Is that transparency? Is that talking more? Or I guess that's communication. Is that going out on dates? What is it? Because if you don't know, how can you achieve it? And same with your business, same with your kids. All of these things, they matter because time doesn't stop. Time continues to tick on whether you're making a list or you're not. And I can tell you, if you're looking for fulfillment and you're looking for just that comfort and knowing that I have my successful business, which I love, I have my beautiful family, I have a beautiful life that I'm really nurturing. If you can put those two together, it is a fulfillment. And the only reason why I know this so well is because I didn't have that. And I literally say, like, thank you, Lord, for just like opening my eyes so I can have change. Because that is not the mom or the wife that I wanted to be. And now I can say, hey, I've had this ability to change, and I've had this time to reflect. And now it is my responsibility to make that shift, because nobody is going to make that shift for me except for me. And so that is where I even saw something today where someone says, it said, like, so what? And they're like, so what? I have this going on. So what? I have that going on. And the next phrase was, so what? What now? And that was my so what? Yeah, I got all this going on. So what? I got the success. So what? But it was like, no, 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 no. That doesn't work anymore. Like, so what now? No, so what now can I do that can change the trajectory of my life and be present for my kids and my husband.
And then your change now is leading to our change, which will just continue this whole change agent for women. But you had to do it first. You had to do it first to then show us and give us permission. And Rachel, what now? Where can we find more of you? Girl, like you're our new person here. Where can we find more of you? And of course, you guys know I'll always put this in the show notes, but where can we get more Rachel?
Well, I mean, people can go to my website. That is more just, my coaching platform, which is rachelclosson.com. It does have a free video series that will go over time and boundaries, those types of things. So if you want to lean into that a little bit more, that's there. I also do once a year, we are doing women's retreats. This year, it's actually going to be in Spain in April. So if anybody likes to, come on, girl, go abroad,
Raise his
then
hand. Raise his
right.
hand. Yeah.
So that is really just diving into the core of who we are. But of course, if you just want the quick stuff, they can visit my Instagram, which is just Rachel Closson _
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. So I have a little gift for you for being on, and it's a pretend gift. We have no budget here, so it's just a pretend gift, Rachel.
Yeah, I love that.
Being real. It is the gift because this is about time. Okay, it is the gift of a bonus hour. So if I gave you a gift, 1 hour, 60 minutes, you don't have to account for it for anybody or anything. You can do with it whatever you want. What would you do, Rachel, with your bonus hour?
Oh gosh. I I believe I would go back to, just because of the level of importance that this is for me right now, especially right now, would be to intentionally sit down and make sure that the time that I have created is allotted and spent how I want it to be spent. Um, and the reason why I say this, can I just share something real quick with you?
Yes.
Okay. Um, so I almost lost my dad a week ago, and he was doing great. He was doing fantastic. And it was this moment of time that everything almost changed, like everything would change, right? And what I realized in that moment was, and this is just like why so much of what I shared today, and I don't want to get like choked up, but this is just like so fresh from like a week ago. Is life, we everybody's life ends, right? It's the inevitable, born and death. It is what it is. But there is such meaning and purpose that we can bring into this space. And when I got the news that we almost lost my dad, I really looked back and asked myself, did I show up in the way I wanted to have shown up? Could I have loved a little bit more? Could I have let my ego drop to the side a little bit more? Could I have hugged him more? How could I have showed up? Like, would I, if that was his last breath, and would I be content with how he would have left, And I'm obviously a believer, so I would be reunited in heaven, but nonetheless, like selfishly here, keeping him on earth, right? And I thought to myself, I'm very pleased with how I've shown up, but I could do more. And I would really, so if you gave me that hour, I would really check in with all of my relationships and where I'm at and saying, we have this life on earth here. Am I living it to the best of who I am? And am I loving, or am I wasting time for what? Right? And so that's what I would do with my your short question. My long answer is I would really lean into how that time is being spent and make sure and like do that double check that I am really creating that time in all aspects of my life. Sorry.
Wow. Sorry, are you kidding?
uh,
That that is quite valuable from the heart. Thank your daddy for being part of our conversation today.
yeah, thank you
And
for letting me share that.
yeah, and for reminding us that, we can have all the best planners and the pretty pens and we can have timers and we can do, but for why and for what? And if it's not about time spent with the people that we love and investing in our mission and our call, like, so what, right? But now, what
Exactly.
now?
Exactly.
Well, and my prayer, Rachel, is that God would grant you what feels like bonus time to be able to do that and to find the time for that, because obviously that is where your heart is. And whoo, girl, that's where our heart is now too. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that. That was powerful and important.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, I think we all have a new friend, and her name is Rachel. And thank you, Rachel. Thank you for gifting us today with your
Thank you.
wisdom, with a new way of thinking about maybe things that we've been taught before, but just needed a different perspective. So we're going to have a method to our madness now. We're going to move forward in all of these areas, maybe not perfectly, but with some great permission and a great example in you. So thank you, Rachel.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. God bless everybody. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Perfect-ish Time Management Podcast. Let's keep the fun going. Follow me on social and join our Facebook community. And if you're ready for some one-on-one time management coaching to reach the top of your game without burnout or guilt, I'd love to chat. Book a free interest call using the link in the show notes or send me a DM. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and share it with a friend who's ready to master their time too. Remember, we're in this together, making real progress towards becoming perfect-ish.